Fact. Less than 1% of those players desiring to play at the D1 level get the opportunity to do so. Fact. It is not always the best players who get recruited, but the best known players. Unknown equals unrecruited. Preparation is the key for a player who hopes to play at the collegiate level, regardless of the division. And this would apply to if you're going into the NFL. And after looking at some of these kids up here, I'm sure 3 or 4 years from now, you'll be considering that as well. As I see it, most of the preparation for the collegiate level is centered around combine results. Measurements, height, weight, speed, agility, etc. You know what I'm talking about. But measurables are only an indicator of potential. They are not the bottom line. You can be a great athlete and not even a good football player. The bottom line is this: are you a football player? They sent me down when I was with the head scout for Pittsburgh Total Scouting. Mr. Rooney sent me down to Florida. Actually, it was on just part of my trips, but I had to get down there and look at a linebacker. His name was Huey Richardson. Huey Richardson was rated by everybody, every scout in the league, as a #1 draft choice. I went down and watched this kid, and he was a great athlete. I watched him practice, I watched him play, I studied films, I interviewed people, and when it all was said and done, I wrote him up on my scouting report as a free agent. Now, that's pretty bold. In case a lot of scouts just sit on the fence. But the ironic part about it is the Steelers drafted him in round 1. The next day I go to the office, and as soon as I go in, the secretary says, "John, Mr. Rooney wants to see you." And I knew what it was about. So I walked in, he says, "How in the hell can you give the #1 draft choice a free agent grade?" And I said, "Mr. Rooney," I said, "I think he's a great athlete, but he's not a football player. And I'm not going to change my mind until he proves me differently." And they said, "Well, you think you're right and the world's wrong." And I said, "Yeah, you're right, I do, about this guy." And so, Mr. Rooney's an Irishman and I'm a German, and it's not real good when he had a real wide desk, thank God, or we'd have probably killed each other. But, finally the argument, this was a shouting thing. Mr. Rooney and I are friends. We talk about 2 or 3 times a week, to this day. But finally, the argument got pretty heated, and finally I said to him, "Mr. Rooney, let me tell you something. If you want athletes, send me to the Olympics. Not to the University of Florida. Send me to the Olympics." The only problem with that is half of those athletes are women. They're great athletes, but I guarantee you they're not football players. There are so many examples of great college and pro players who did not measure up to the standards of the measurable tests. The most neglected area in preparation phase to me is this: players neglect to perfect the skills of their trade. Tim Tebow is a prime example today. In my opinion, his passing mechanics, a critical factor in a quarterback's success, are totally unacceptable. How? Tim now has hired 4 different people to instruct him and correct his mechanics. The problem is he only has about 4 or 6 weeks to do it. Okay? My question is this: why wasn't he coached on him 10 years ago? Why now? And my point is this, and the problem is clear. Because of time restraints and misplaced priorities, coaches spend the majority of their time practicing offensive and defensive schemes. They depend on the player's athletic skills and rarely stress the fundamentals. I literally get sick in my stomach when I watch people try to tackle on TV. Paul Brown, maybe the greatest coach that ever lived, and he was a friend of mine as well, began every practice by teaching form tackling and open field tackling, and that included quarterbacks. In preparation for the next level, kids, seek out someone to develop your skills of the trade. This is especially important seeking to impress at the pro level, and I don't know if we have any of those players kind of here tonight. The next thing is strength and agility. This is certainly not my area of expertise, but I know football players are not power lifters, and they are not bodybuilders. A football player's strength training must be position specific and functional. The largest muscles in the body are located between the hips and the knee, and yet I see so many players who will not bend their knees and use the explosive potential that they've worked so hard to achieve. 30% of football is played vertically. 70% of football is played horizontally. Agility, foot quickness, balance, change of direction, these are the essential elements that must be developed to the max. If I have seemed to get a little ahead of myself, it's only because that of which I discussed is so real to you. But let us now talk about reality at its base. The NCAA requires a core grade point average minimum. For D1 schools, the core consists of 16 core courses. D2 requires a core of 14 courses. They are calculated from your freshman year. You can't wait till you're a junior to get serious about your grades. The first question a recruiter will ask is this: can we get him in school? Of course, if you can't get into school, then you can't play, period. They have a thing called the sliding scale. People who do not test well, there are some people that don't test well. So if your core GPA is high enough, they will adjust downward the requirements for the ACT or SAT. So when it comes to academics, achievement, good is good and better is better. Before I move on from the academic factors, let me make a real strong suggestion. If you do not have solid study skills, find someone who can teach you how to systematically study before you get to your freshman year in college. One last area of the preparation phase is this, and it is vital: the support of the family. Moms and dads or mentors, whoever you may be, encourage the passion that your son has. Be his ultimate resource for support. Do not set for him goals that are unrealistic in order to satisfy your ego. I hear so many parents say, he can play at the D1 level. Well, maybe he can, and maybe you just wish he can. The football experience is the most important factor. You know, as I look back at my college years, and that's been a couple years ago, the people I remember are my teammates. I don't know who was in my history class or my biology class, but I remember my teammates. A real football player must play the game, not watch it from the bench. It is better to be a big fish in a little pond than a little fish in a big pond. Maybe it is his dream to play in the NFL, and you and he think that the only way to accomplish that goal is through a D1 program. I have in my files a list of 850 players from NAIA, Division I AA, Division II, and NAIA who have played in the NFL. If you are a prospect, the NFL will know about you. The last factor, and by no means the least, is character. Reputation has been defined as what people think of you. Character is what you know to be true about yourself, what you are like when there's no one else around to see your actions. Your character is evaluated by every college program and a grading area on every pro scouting report. At the pro level, the scrutiny of your character is intense and no stone is left unturned. I want to give you an example about character. When I was coaching at West Virginia with Bobby Bowden, we were scheduled to play Penn State in the game of the week. Now, you people, younger people today don't know what the game of the week is because there's 900 games every week. But back then, ABC had a game of the week, and it was Chris Schenkel and Bud Wilkinson that did the game. So Thursday, before we play Penn State on the game of the week, Coach Bowden calls me in his office. He says, "John, I want you to go up to a place called the Mile Ground. And up on the Mile Ground, there's a bar, nightclub called the Staircase. I want you to go up there and make sure none of our players are there." Okay? And now, I didn't want to do that because I always thought there's enough problems without looking for more. But I did my duty. I go up to the Staircase, and almost everybody was there. And they were all partying. I came back to the office next day, and I knew the first thing was going to happen. Bobby says, "John, how'd it go last night?" I said, "Coach, I didn't see anybody." I never told him that story, but what was I going to do? Tell him they're all there? Anyhow, we go out. We go up on Penn State 14-0, and the score ends up, I think it was 42-14, Penn State. The point of that story is, and the lesson that I learned is this: you win with character, not characters. That same team was selected to play Lou Holtz's North Carolina State team in the Peach Bowl. They voted not to go. And we finally had to say, "Look, we'll just practice half a day and take it, you know." So, okay, they decided they'd go. Well, we got to Atlanta, and you couldn't find them because they were all at the Atlanta Underground. And North Carolina embarrassed us that night. You win with character, not characters. Players, let me say this. There are no shortcuts, no easy way to transition from high school football to college football. Football is a tough and sometimes brutal game. It is not a game for the weak of heart or the weak of spirit. I believe that success in this ultimate team sport is more mental than physical. Or as Yogi Berra used to say, 90% of the game is half mental. It requires a mental toughness that transcends everyday life. But it is mastered, if it is mastered, produces great rewards. If you have the opportunity and the passion to continue to play this great game, go for it. But realize the cost and be willing to pay the price. You will never regret it. And remember this: focus and finish. Thank you.
And once again, an applause for John Westenhaver. Great job, John. Thank you so much.